sound there and a big action thriller sound, and then juxtaposed against the little bleeps and blips of the Buy More music, it's pretty disparate, you know?
Yeah.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Now, you've got a lot of experience with that. Looking through your resume on IMDb, you've done quite a few features.
I've done a fair amount of features. I've done some nice work with Sony Screen Gems.
Mm-hmm.
I have a great director friend of mine, J.S. Cardone. I call him Joe, but he really gave me my first big break in features, which was The Forsaken for Sony, which was a theatrical release, and that was a neat film. It was kind of a road picture, and you know, it had some vampire elements, but it I don't know. I still hold that movie very close to my heart. It was a lot of fun to do. It was very stylized and kind of different. I think we did something a little different there. But I've done some big action stuff. I've also done some comedy stuff. I've done stuff for the Disney Channel. There's a movie called Brainiacs.com, which is just kind of this cute little movie that just never seems to die. I mean, I keep finding it on my royalties. You know, it just keeps coming up. So
Oh, yeah.
it's a really cute little movie, and you know, that was a chance to do some kind of orchestral comedic stuff, which definitely comes to play in Chuck.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, I did a lot of work for Mercedes-Benz and IBM and some other companies. I did some industrial work with a company in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really kind of cut my teeth on putting a lot of these modern beats and things underneath orchestral backdrop.
Yeah.
You know, which really plays into the texture and the fabric of the music for Chuck. So it's, you know, it's kind of been just a combination of all the things I've done over the past 12 years, you know, that's kind of culminated in this sound of Chuck, which has been really fun.
You've honestly got a great mix there, and I do notice that the orchestral backing and mixing that with the electronic music has given, I think, a perfect flavor for exactly what he's in, because you've got these dramatic and exciting situations, and then you've got his nerdness to mix with that.
Right. Yeah, Chuck's sort of, I mean, I'm sure he would agree that he's a lovable geek, you know what I mean? He's like, and I, you know, I relate to Chuck very directly, and it was funny when I had the meeting to get the show. I was in the meeting with Josh Schwartz, and I said, you know, one of the very first computer games I ever played was Zork.
You're kidding, me too.
It was the first game I ever got on the Commodore 64, you know? I mean, I sort of am Chuck, you know? And so we had a pretty good laugh over that.
I can totally relate. That leads towards a couple of questions that I was going to ask. Now, just for our listeners, they may not know that Josh Schwartz, along with Chris Fedek, created the show, and Josh is the showrunner, which means he's the lead writer on the show.
Right.
What's it like working with Josh? I hear he can be really hands-on with the music.
Oh, Josh is amazing. I mean, he really has a good sense of music. He's listening to music all the time. And just for your listeners, you know, Josh created the OC, which was on for a number of seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was the youngest showrunner ever at the time. He was like 26 or something.
Yeah.
So he's a young guy, and tons of energy, really wonderful to work with, has a great sense of humor, and is also very good at kind of guiding the emotional path of the show. I've really enjoyed working with Josh in the aspect that, you know, he really knows where to pull back on a scene musically, or you know, where to kind of lean on it a little bit. And I've really learned a lot from him about, you know, the emotional arc of a scene, or even the emotional arc of an episode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been fun. And yeah, so to answer your question, I would say he is very hands-on, but not so much in a way that I in any way feel squelched. I mean, he's also really great about, you know, I try something wacky and it works, and he goes, that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we did the episode with the Master Remote.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when when Harry Tang went in his Master Remote, and I said, guys, I really want to run with this Lord of the Rings thing, you know, and they're like, well, okay, give it a try, you know, see what you think. And
yeah,
and we all ended up, you know, thinking that was pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, I noticed on your credits you've done some work on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I actually did. I worked on a video game, Lord of the Rings, The Middle Earth. It was a pretty big game on PC, and I wrote, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 minutes of stuff for the game, and we orchestrated it and had it recorded up in Seattle. That was a fun project. I really enjoyed that.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's definitely a universe I've done a little bit of work in, and so it was just fun to bring that to the table, because the music, I mean, wasn't at all comedic. I mean, I played it straight down the middle as if, I were scoring Lord of the Rings 4.
Hmm.
And I think that's what made it so funny up against Harry Tang, who I'm going to sorely miss, by the way.
Oh yeah, and the music you did for Harry was just classic. We'll backtrack a little bit because you were doing a lot of work on features, and you'd work in TV a lot, but not a lot of series work. How did you end up getting into the room with Josh?
Well, this is an interesting story. I had mentioned The Forsaken early in the interview, and the editor of that film was Norman Buckley, who has become a close friend over the years, a really fantastic editor. And he was working on the pilot for Chuck with Josh Schwartz and with Mick G, who is also an executive producer. And I remember just giving Norm a call kind of out of the blue to say, hey, I hear you're working on something. If you need anything, I'm here. And he's like, yeah, I'll call you in a few weeks when I'm done. And I said, okay. And I kind of didn't take no for an answer and emailed him again and said, look, you need anything, I'm here. It's, whatever you need, it's not going to cost you a dime. I'm on the hook for this. And so I got a call, I don't know, maybe 24 hours later, maybe less. And he goes, okay, you're on the hook. He goes, I don't feel good about making you work for nothing. And I said, look, I'm the one volunteering. And so basically I just started cutting together temp for them from some different sources, things they were using. They had some vibes that they liked, but they were really short. And so I took those, like maybe a 50-second clip of music, and I put it into a program called Live, which allows me to really mess with the time and the timing of everything. And I sort of built cues around them. And so I've basically created some custom temp music for them. And it just started to work, and Norm was enjoying cutting to it. And I just kept going. I mean, after about 3 weeks of stuff, Norm and I had worked on quite a few cues. And so when it came time to choose a composer for the show, I made it onto the short list, and it just clicked. I mean, I can honestly say it was the best meeting I've ever had. It's for anyone in the creative industry who has to go in and sort of take a meeting to get a job, this was one time where I really felt relaxed and felt good about the project and what I had done. And it was just a good fit. And I should also mention Ben Cundy, who is our fantastic producer, who is really there day to day dealing with all the things that come up for the show. And he was also really helpful I think in helping me get the job.
Yeah.
Alex Patsavas was there, and she's a friend from The Forsaken as well. So it kind of all goes back to this horror movie I did 6 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's that story.
Now, has it been a big change of pace from your feature work?
Oh God, yes. I've been shocked at how much work it is, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
I'd always heard that network television was a fast pace, and I'm like, yeah. I write fast. And I do. I think, compared to some people, I write fairly quickly, but I was not prepared for the onslaught of music, week after week, because in those early episodes I was writing between, I think the most I ever wrote was probably 25 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Of score, but that's in a week. That's in 4 days.
Wow.
5 days max. And I was doing that 6-7 weeks at a time, and it was pretty challenging. But I think the difference is, and this is not to pat myself on the back, but I think the difference is that a lot of people in television, some composers have other people working with them who lighten the load a bit, who take cues off their plate, and so it becomes a little bit more music by committee, which I really didn't want for this show, and it is not something I'm interested in doing, because I just really enjoy the personal sense of satisfaction when something's done, for better or for worse, you did it, and so you can stand up and say, yeah, I did that, love it or hate it, there's no one else to blame.
Oh yeah. Now, I have to mention that the average listener loves the music, but really has no idea about the process of how you come up with the appropriate music for each scene, how you even know what kind of mood you want to create. So can you tell us about, like, first of all, how early do you see the script? Are you involved early in the process as the cuts start coming together? And when you see the material, how do you know where you're going with it?
Well, that's a great question. And it was a little different in the beginning of the series than it is just, in the last few episodes. And so I'll start at the beginning where, yes, I did read the scripts and I was working kind of way ahead of the curve as Norman and I and Josh and everybody else. But predominantly Norman and I were really kind of working on trying to get a vibe going for some different things that we would then present to Josh, and he would kind of guide us along. And so yeah, I was a couple episodes ahead with script reading at that point, and was starting to get themes worked out. And basically, what happens is that the editors will cut a show, and they have to have music, to cut to. That's how they like to work. So a lot of times they'll come at it with other scores. I think the Bourne Identity series got a lot of play when we were temping. I know Thomas Newman is a stalwart in the temping. He's great. Obviously, he has a very unique sound. So he presents his own challenge when it comes time to replace Tom Newman. Who I'm not interested in doing a wholesale copy of. I think there's enough of that going on these days. But so basically, the editor goes through and they temp the entire show, and they work with Josh very closely on the style and the feelings of different scenes, and they get as close as they can with the temp music. And then I'm brought in at the spotting session, and we go through the entire show beginning to end, and they tell me where they want the cues and give me a sense of the style. And sometimes I'll have ideas about, hey, what if, like the Lord of the Rings thing, what if we try that there? And they'll say, okay, try it. We don't know, but, we'll see what happens. And then I start basically working on cues. And basically I work on the show from front to back. And then I'll decide, if there's different themes, like say there's some buy more themes, maybe I'll attack those first in the different parts of the show. Or usually the emotional scenes can be the most challenging to get the right tone.
Yeah.
One great example of that would be, there's a really nice scene between Chuck and Sarah. I forget which episode it is, but they're in a hotel room and he brings a pizza over.
Oh, I love that scene.
Yeah, and it was such a great scene. The acting in that scene is superlative. The editing, everything just really came together. And so it was, a big responsibility for me to put the right music there and make it happen. And I felt like we did in the end. I think we were all really happy, and it ended up just really being piano, and kind of playing around their emotions and clearing the dialogue. And I mean, that's if you sort of go down on a scene level, that's what I'm doing, is that I'm really trying to get under the skin of a scene and figure out what is it supposed to be about, and how am I helping the scene, and how do I stay out of the way is a primary concern, because you don't want to step on what's there. You only want to support it. And so that's, even in an action scene, that's, if I'm providing drive for the scene, I still want to make sure that I'm staying out of the way of stuff so that the music isn't popping over the foreground. It still is underscore by definition. And, so that's something I really strive for, is to try and make sure that I'm serving the scene and that I'm not jumping in the face of what's going on.
Well, so far what we've seen, it's a perfect balance. I know myself working in the industry, sometimes we can do something and we don't, because we're not sitting in a movie theater.
Right.
We don't see how people are reacting to it.